Hello to everybody. Um, so this is our IPAA International Project on Art and Aesthetics Séminaire collectif, which starts today. And it's thank you for joining us. So this Séminaire collectif is about planetary art. We'll try to say, not to define it, but try to describe it today. And first, let me say a few words about IPAA, which joins together students and teachers from Taiwan, from Canada, and from France. So here, the professors are in Taiwan, Professor Lin Chi-Ming, in Toronto, Professor Johanna Liu, and in Paris, myself. So, and let me say a few words about the poster of this Séminaire collectif, which is poster on the exhibition made by Taiwanese artist whose name is Ding Dong Zhang, Zhang Shuoyin. He's a Taiwanese contemporary artist, and you can see on his page that he explains that through an installation consisting of a semi-documentary two-channel video and a dwelling place and apparatus is created, he presents connections between the following three indigenous species found in Taiwan's natural landscape: battle tree, bird's nest fern, and African snails. Batonal trees were first imported in Taiwan by the Dutch. Bird's nest fern is a wild edible plant native to Taiwan, and African snails were introduced by the Japanese government from Singapore as a meat substitute. All that has consequences, and the artist studies such consequences and shows them and explains them to us. So this is the aim of our Séminaire collectif. Try to understand what can the artist tell us about our relationship with the planet. So this is not a course. This is not the Séminaire collectif, and not something which is already thought about. It's a work in progress, and we really hope that the doctoral students and all the students will get involved into it to help us. So first, let's go back to the 20th century. The late 1960s and the 1970s, a new artistic trend emerged at the same time as political ecology. The first International Earth Day took place in 1970, and Greenpeace, the first of the major pro-environment NGOs, was created in 1971. At that time, artists wanted to get out of their studios to invent new relationships with the landscape by merging with it, but also by making it the very object of their creation. Land art was born out of minimalism, conceptual art, and the rejection of galleries and museums. Western artists wanted to create in the midst of the natural environment. It was also a time of feminist demands, of the struggle of Black minorities, of the recognition of gay rights, and of the protests against the Vietnam War. Land artists in the 1960s and the early 1970s were influenced by campaigns against the war in Vietnam and against nuclear power. They wanted peace, and in particular, peace with nature. Now, there are three reference works on land art and its links with earth art and environmental art, including two in French. The first one is Gilles Tiberghien's. His book is called Land Art. It was First published in 1993, reissued in 1912, and translated in English by Princeton University Press in 1996. In 1993, when Tiberghien's book was first published, there was virtually nothing in French or in English on this body of work known as land art. Even in the United States, interest remained marginal. At the time, Tiberghien took an art historian's and a philosopher's approach, clearing up a whole area of art history. Today, many of the artists featured in the book are recognized as among the greatest creators of the 20th century. Christo and Jean-Claude, Walter de Maria, Jan de Betz, Michael Heiser, Nancy Holt, Richard Long, Dennis Oppenheim, Robert Morris, or Robert Smithson, and there are many others as well. Tiberghien asked the question of what is land art? He explains in his book, land art is not a movement in the sociological sense of the word. It's not either a school to which various artists can aspire, but rather a convenient term that brings together artists working on projects that are often on the side, using earth and natural materials as a whole. The term was coined by one of the land artists, Walter de Maria. Robert Smithson spoke about earthworks. Now, the second book, so this is Christo and Jean-Claude's one of land art's work in 1976. Another, a second book, also in French, but written by a Belgian, Anne-Françoise Penders, En chemin, which means on the way. The first volume is leaving. The second volume is about coming back. Revenir. The author is a philosopher and a photographer. She shows how the various forms of displacements observed among land artists establish the real world as a workshop, and how, by transforming the act of leaving the studio into a desire to go elsewhere, travel constitutes a particular modality of displacement. As a creator of works of art, and often a work in itself, travel summons up the whole world as a potential site for art. On this point, we can see some relationships between planetary art and land art. We'll talk about this later. The third book is not really a reference book. Jeffrey Kastner's and Brian Wallace's Land Environment Art, published in 1998, is a book written by art critics and curators. Their book is interesting, mainly because it gives documents to read that constitute a large part of the book, and these documents are the texts mainly of the artists themselves. So this is very interesting. The text written by the artists is not really new. So this is about land art. And second, I would like to talk about earth art. Well, we can say that earth art is a variant of land art. According to the artists who practice earth art, the earth becomes a playground from which to extract the materials needed to create works stretching over several kilometers. The main artists are Walter de Maria, so you see you have land artists that practice also earth art, Andy Goldsworthy, Michael Heiser, Nancy Holt, Richard Long, and Robert Smithson, and many others. Earth art, as the term suggests, is working with the earth. From earth art comes the term earthwork. It is defined in the Webster's Dictionary of 1968 as any construction, whether a temporary breastwork or permanent fortification, the material of which is chiefly earth. The operation connected with excavations and embankments of earth in preparing foundations of buildings, in constructing canals, railroads, etc. So the term earthwork came into the public eye in 1968 when Virginia Dwan opened an exhibition entitled Earthworks in her New York gallery, as you can see here. This was the flyer. But it was also, so with these artists, it was also the starting point for a practice initiated by Robert Smithson. He used it mainly in an article of 1967 about what he calls the monuments of Passaic. So here is the paper, the article. The monuments of Passaic. Has Passaic replaced Rome as the eternal city in Art Forum? So earthworks in his paper refers actually to a 1966 science fiction book by Brian W. Aldiss, from which Smithson undoubtedly borrowed the word to designate his monumental works. The term was also thematized by the artist Robert Morris. Earth art, also referred to land art or to earthworks, is largely an American group of artists that use the natural landscape to create site-specific structures, art forms, and sculptures. The movement has an outgrowth of conceptualism and minimalism. The beginnings of the environmental movement and the rampant commoditization of American art in the late 1960s influenced ideas and works that were, to varying degrees, divorced from the art market. In addition to the monumentality and simplicity of minimalist objects, the artists were drawn to the humble, everyday materials of art povera and the participatory social sculptures of Joseph Beuys that stressed performance and creativity in any environment. The favored materials for earthworks and earth art were those that could be extracted directly from nature, such as stones, water, gravel, and soil. So this is Robert Smithson artwork, which is, well, maybe the most well-known, which has been created in 1970. You can see, you can find these pictures now on the internet, which was completely impossible in the 1990s when Thiberien's book was first published. Now you can find very easily all these pictures. So the favorite materials for earthwork and earth art were those that could be extracted directly from nature, as I said, such as stones, water, gravel, and soil. Influenced by prehistoric artworks such as Stonehenge, earth artists left their structures exposed to the elements, as you can see here. The resulting ephemerality and eventual disintegration of the works put them outside of the mainstream, where works of art were typically coddled and protected in controlled environments. Earth artists often used materials that were available at the site on which their works were constructed and placed, honoring the specificity of the site. Locals were commonly chosen for particular reasons. Robert Smithson, for example, picked damaged sites for his works in order to suggest renewal and rebirth. This idea of site specificity was something introduced to the art world by earth art, again placing the artists at the vanguard because their pieces often required wide, open spaces, meaning that many of their works were not available on the average viewer, and thus questioned by the very purpose of art as something to be viewed. The rejection of traditional galleries and museum spaces defined earth art practice. By creating their works outside of these institutions, Earth artists rebuffed the commodity status these venues conferred on art, again challenging traditional definitions of art as something to be bought and sold for profit. So here the term earth art, earth, has the main meaning of soil. It's not the earth in the sense of a planet. So this is after land art, earth art. Let's see now environmental art. The term environmental art is used generically to describe the artistic process of work of art in which the artist is in direct dialogue with the environment. This environment can also be seen as the political, historical, and social context. Environmental art began to spread effectively in the 1960s. To begin, environmental art is a very broad term. It embraces a variety of practices and movements, such as, but not limited to, land art, earth art, sustainable art, conceptual art. As a movement, environmental art has emerged in the 1960s. Oh, so that's what the earth art key artists. So in the environmental art key artists were, of course, first Joseph Beuys. So Jean-Max Albert, Joseph Beuys, Agnès Dennis, Herman de Vries, Andy Goldsworthy, Piotr Kowalski, Andrew Rogers, Robert Smithson, Niels Udo. So you see both American and European artists, half and half. Although environmental art is something referred to as the ecology movement, it's important to mention that ecological art or eco art is a subcategory of environmental art. This is quite confusing because the terms are often used interchangeably. This art practice embraces an ethic of social justice in its content and form. At the same time, in the 1960s and 1970s, ecological artists appeared. Ecological artists were the offspring of political ecology. So ecological art, which emerged in the 1960s and 1970s as well, was originally a form of field art designed to rehabilitate polluted, ecologically and socially dysfunctional earth sites, especially urban sites. They have been reduced to photographs, diagrams, and a few relics with a testimonial function. And the ecological actions of Patricia Johansson, as you can see here, Mirle Eucalyptus, here is a photography of her performance, and she stages herself in the act of cleaning. I make maintenance art 1 hour every day, which was performed in 1973. So Eucalyptus, Alan Sonfist. Well, to mention only the pioneers of this movement, these artists circumscribed a particularly inefficient mode of exhibition because there was no exhibition at all. In other words, unlike land art, ecological art has positioned itself in the field of useful action. So here is Alan Sonfist's artwork. He introduced the key environmental ideas of bringing nature back into the urban environment with his time landscape sculpture created in New York City in 1967. So this is a 1982 picture. Another example is Agnès Dennis. She created a work in downtown Manhattan, and she's Hungarian. She's not American. In downtown Manhattan called Whitfield, a confrontation, in which she planted a field of wheat on the 2-acre side of landfill covered with urban detritus and rubble in 1982. So the ecological artists still exist and are very active. They participate in society in a militant way. Some become shepherds, farmers, herbalists, etc., in order to be able to to carry out their artistic practice. They do not hesitate to embrace other fields of action for their creation. They also often work collaboratively. On ecological art, you can see Paul Arden's book. He's a French historian and curator, an art écologique, which is an ecological art, création plasticienne et anthropocène, which means plastic creation and Anthropocene, published in 2018. But above all, ecology and its political dimension are studied in Bruno Latour's book, Politique de la nature, Politics of Nature, Comment faire entrer les sciences en démocratie, How to bring science into democracy. I think that Professors Johanna Liu and Chi-Ming will talk about this topic. A major change occurred with the planetary artists, who appeared later in the 1990s. They are also politically committed, but they use science and technology to their advantage and make this known. For planetary artists, technology and science are very important, even primordial. Why planetary? Because we are no longer in an era of simple globalization. Globalization was essentially about exchanges and interactions between human beings and between different cultures. But today, everything that happens on one side of the planet influences what happens on the other. We are all interdependent, not just us as humans, but above all, humans and everything we call nature. The world around us, including living non humans, from plants to clouds, insects, rocks, animals, and everything we cannot see or even perceive. The question posed by planetary art is no longer just that of globalization or intercultural exchange, but also that of the planet and our relationship as humans to nature, to non humans. It's about questioning planetary interdependence. Planetary art is a form of art that takes the earth as a principle of reflection and no longer as a simple object of study or of use, and which, moreover, attempts to move away from placing humans at the center of thought in favor of non humans. On this last point, traditional Chinese thought can be of great help. For example, Song Dynasty, 11th century, Su Dongpo, described his cousin Wen Tong painting bamboos, and he says that Wen Tong's bamboos were just completely exceptional for one reason, because Wen Tong was able to become a bamboo before painting it. Becoming a bamboo was the result of a dialogue between him and the bamboo. So he didn't take the bamboo as an object, but as a subject with which he could dialogue. This changed completely the point of view of the human being. He becomes a bamboo. And since several centuries before AD, Chinese philosophers and then later Chinese literary artists imagined a world with no separation between inside and outside, between myself and the world. For example, in the Zhuangzi, the philosophical text of Zhuangzi, the famous anecdote of the butterfly. Zhuangzhou wakes up suddenly and he has a dream that he was a butterfly. So when he wakes up, he doesn't know whether he is the butterfly dreaming of Zhuangzhou, dreaming of the butterfly, or if he is Zhuangzhou dreaming of the butterfly. I think that Professor Chen Kaiyuan will be speaking on this subject in May's session. So if we get back to planetary art, For planetary art, as for ecological art, environmental art, and land art before it, institutions such as museums or galleries which seek to present their works are not adapted. This form of art seeks to gain recognition through other means, even if it does not, of course, turn its back on museums. We can identify two characteristics at the moment of planetary art. The first one is the use of science and technology, digital in particular. The second is the relationship with the planet and specifically with non-humans. With regard to the first characteristic, it seems that the term planetary art first appeared in France with an artist called Stéphane Baron in 1994 when he published his CD-ROM, Art planétaire, planetary art, and he says earth art. Here, the expression earth art should not mislead us. Earth art does not have the same meaning as we have just seen with the American artists. For the American artists, earth meant soil. But for Baron, earth is a planet earth. Baron refers to philosophers, in particular to Michel Serres and to Bruno Latour. But he also refers to artists such as Yves Klein, who is deeply influenced by Japanese spirituality. Baron stresses on spirituality in his book and in his artworks as well. He was born in France in 1961. He is a contemporary artist and teacher-researcher at the Université Paul Valéry in Montpellier, south of France. Since 1984, he has created numerous works that he has theorized later under the two terms planetary art and techno-romanticism. Planetary art is a form of art that takes the Earth in its planetary dimension as the medium for artistic creation. And techno-romanticism is a neologism he has coined. He tries to show the links between art and new technologies in the context of the threats posed to nature by technoscience and economic development. So Stéphane Baron is active in France and abroad. He received Villa Médicis grant in 1996 for Ozone, a planetary sound installation exhibited at the Adelaide Biennial. Ozone was one of the first works of art to use the internet. Measurements of ozone produced by car traffic in Lille, in north of France, a big city in the northern part of France. So, produced by car traffic in Lille and measurements of ultraviolet rays passing through the ozone layer in Australia are transformed into sounds broadcast in a garden in Adelaide and in the streets of Roubaix, also a city in the northern part of France. So, as an artist and a teacher, Stéphane Baron has written numerous essays on new developments in the contemporary art. His work on the theory and practice of the technological arts and contemporary art also has a dimension that goes beyond art, touching on social, political, and spiritual issues. In his book, Toucher l'espace poétique de l'art planétaire, Touch Space, Poetics of Planetary Art, Stéphane Baron first explains his position on the contributions of the philosopher Michel Serres, especially in Serres' book Le Contrat Naturel, Natural Contract. So here is what he says in French, and I translate it with my bad English. The idea of a natural contract, in addition to the social contract, as proposed by Michel Serres, is not a questioning of the human, but an attempt to find out the types of relationship with nature. the technocritic arts, explore this paradoxical and complex position. We don't have to choose between nature and technology. We want to live and explore both worlds. We don't want to use technology to rule man and nature, but to develop paradigms of cooperation, interaction, and love. Planetary art must be underlain by a spiritual and ethical quest, which I call techno-romantic. It's a part of this ecological awareness and the desire to forge links between humans and the planet. Planetary art celebrates the end of dualism. So he is very interested by the spiritual and ethical quest. This is the first point. And the second point, the end of dualism is very important. It means that man and nature, for him, should not be separated anymore. And then Stéphane Baron gives in his book a detailed account of his artistic projects and their political and social significance. But you can find them on his website as well. He describes how they have been received by art critics, but he's more a practitioner than a theoretician. And he has, so that's for the spiritual aspect of these artworks and for the relationship with what I'm going to introduce you later. He has created an artwork which is called Le Pouvoir des Fleurs, the power of flowers, in Lille, the big city of the northern part of France, in 1996 as well. It was created with the, in this part of Lille is quite poor, and he has created gardens which the inhabitants, the children and their parents, had to grow flowers. And he shows that how through the growing of flowers, all these families had a new relationship to nature and how they became aware of the importance of nature. And this is to introduce you to another planetary artist. It's in 1992, actually, the French gardener, landscape gardener, botanist, and entomologist, biologist, and writer, Gilles Clément, he started to use the term planetary garden. But the term appeared in one of his books in 1995, and this book was written together with the artist Michel Blasi for an art and design school in Valence, south of France. So the planetary garden is an idea Gilles Clément developed, and he won the Grand Prix du Paysage, great grant of landscape in 1998. According to him, the Earth, like a garden, is an enclosed, finite space that is up to us to maintain and preserve. He invites each and every one of us to become aware of the exhaustible aspect of our biodiversity and took this into account in our relationship with nature. It's not at all a question of turning the earth into a garden in the modern sense of the term. It's not at all extracting wild species and replacing them with high-yield crops, for example. But for him, the most important is to consider the earth as an enclosed space in which species evolve under our eyes. This concept allows us to consider human beings' key responsibility in ensuring that the garden is well balanced, including between cultivated and uncultivated areas, as well as the balance and complementary of the whole. Following this first essay on planetary garden, Gilles Clément wrote a series of essays on this topic, together with artists like French urban planner, film director and author Claude Evenot, or French writer and art critic Guy Tortosa. This is so he has written quite a great number of books on this topic on the planetary garden. Now, having reached this point, what do we find as a conclusion? That land art, earth art, eco art, and environmental art, even if they are practiced first by American artists as much as by European artists, are not at all of interest to American researchers and philosophers during the 1990s and the years 2000. Initially, it was only Europeans who described and analyzed it. Only a few American art critics ended up taking an interest in it, but without even mentioning their European predecessors. Although Earth Day and Greenpeace were born in the US, reflections on this type of art returned to Europe, actually. But in the US, it is question of planetary turn or planetary thinking, especially in Northern America. So I think these questions of planetary turn or planetary thinking will be studied maybe by other researchers. We will have the opportunity to present these, but it's different from planetary art. So I think that planetary art is an open concept. In Europe, of course, besides Stéphane Baron, there is Gilles Clément's Planetary Garden, which is very interesting because, as we have seen, it's based on the principle that everything is connected to everything else, and that, as in a garden, as soon as humans intervene, they change the relationships. As for planetary art, we have seen that it differs from its predecessors in that it uses digital science and technology and concerns our planet as a finite entity that humans have a duty to respect. Our purpose here is to look at what artists can contribute to this reflection. Thank you for your attention. And now, if there are any questions, please, you're welcome.